What innocent recording turns terrifying once you know the secret behind it? Story 1. My mom and I recently watched one of those 2020 episodes about a woman who went out drinking one night and was never seen again. She had gone back to a guy's apartment, but hotel footage showed her leaving shortly after arriving. The guy in the apartment swore he didn't do anything to her, but they kept interviewing this one guy, the last person to see her alive. They had stopped at a gas station, and he claimed she started talking to another guy, got into his car, and left. He played the whole, "if I had only known I wouldn't have let her go" act with tears and everything. A few days later, surveillance footage from his job showed him doing something that, at first, seemed unremarkable. He had a cooler on a rolling cart and was placing it in a freezer. He worked for a food production company, so nothing about it raised alarms initially. When the police interviewed his boss, they asked to review all of her footage, and she agreed. When they reached the part showing him putting the cooler in the freezer, she abruptly told him to stop. She explained that those coolers were only used to store granola bars, and there was absolutely no reason for them to be placed in the freezer. The girl's body had been inside. A couple of days later, before the police even saw the footage, he took the cooler out back and burned nearly everything in a barrel down the alley. By the time investigators got to him, he had already bleached his entire van. Story 2. In 2016, YouTuber Brittany Louise Taylor uploaded a video titled "I'm Engaged and Pregnant," where she shared that she had met a man on Tinder and was now expecting a baby. After the baby was born, the horrifying truth came out. This man had never loved her. He had been pretending the entire time, targeting her for human trafficking. He had deliberately gotten her pregnant with the intention of selling their child. With that in mind, it's chilling to rewatch the video and see the way he looks at her in the final moments, as well as how he treats her in other clips from her YouTube channel. Fortunately, she managed to escape and obtain a restraining order. But the scariest part? He never went to prison. Instead, he moved on, impregnated, and married another Instagram influencer, who has since vanished from social media. If you want to know more, Brittany wrote a book about her experience called A Sucky Love Story. It's not the best written book, but the story itself is disturbing and eye-opening. For those wondering, her son is safe, and they now live with her mother in Arizona. Story 3. There's no video of it, but this happened in 2004. John Sharp lived in the suburb of Mornington in Victoria, Australia, with his wife Anna and their 2-year-old daughter Gracie. One day Anna, who was 5 months pregnant with a baby boy, and Gracie suddenly vanished. Sharp made an emotional public plea for his wife to come home, saying that he missed her and Gracie, that he loved them both, and that he just wanted them back. A few days later, police charged a man with their murders. That man was John Sharp. He had killed Anna by shooting her in the head with a bow and arrow. Then he did the same to his 2-year-old daughter. The first shot didn't kill Gracie, so he pulled the arrow out of her head and shot her again. Afterward, he dismembered their bodies, bagged up the remains, and dumped them at a landfill. Initially, he had buried them in the backyard, but later he dug them up, fearing he would be caught. To keep up the illusion that Anna was still alive, he even sent flowers to her mother overseas. Sharp was sentenced to 35 years in prison. From what I've heard, he has spent most of it in solitary confinement, because nearly every other prisoner has tried to kill him. Story 4. The 2007 movie Waitress is a heartwarming film about a small-town waitress with a passion for baking who struggles with an abusive husband and an unwanted pregnancy while trying to find happiness and love. It features big-name stars like Kerry Russell, Nathan Fillion, and Andy Griffith, but most notably, Adrienne Shelly. Shelly wasn't just a co-star, she was also the film's writer and director. Waitress marked her cinematic directorial debut, and when it was released in 2007, it was widely praised for its heartfelt story and unique style. But tragically, Adrienne Shelly never got to see its success. She was murdered in 2006, just 3 months before the movie debuted. Initially, her death was ruled a suicide by hanging, but further investigation revealed that she had been killed by a stranger who staged it to look like she had taken her own life. Waitress became the only film she would ever direct. In her honor, the Adrienne Shelly Foundation was created to support women filmmakers, ensuring that her legacy lives on. It's heartbreaking to think about what the world lost with her death. Waitress remains a beloved film and an incredible musical adaptation, but knowing the tragedy behind it makes it even more bittersweet. Story 5. In June of 2012, a video was recorded at an AMC theater in Connecticut, showing a 20-year-old man playing Dance Dance Revolution. The person filming had spotted him and was recording from behind, mocking him while also admiring his skill at the game. 6 months later, that young man, Adam Lanza, would commit one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history. On December 14, 2012, Lanza shot his mother 4 times in the head while she slept. He then drove to nearby Sandy Hook Elementary School, where he murdered 6 adults and 20 children, all between the ages of 6 and 7. Witnesses reported that during the massacre, he shouted insults and obscenities at his victims. One student recalled hearing a classmate cry out, "Help me! I don't want to be here!" To which Lanza coldly responded, "Well, you're here." As police sirens approached, Lanza pulled out a 10mm pistol and shot himself. Despite extensive investigations, no clear motive for the shooting was ever found. Story 6. In 2012, England was shaken by the tragic case of Mick and Mairead Philpott. Their house had burned down, and 6 of their children lost their lives. Shortly after, the couple held a press conference, appearing emotional as they thanked emergency responders for their efforts in trying to save the children. But the truth behind the fire was far more sinister. Mick Philpott was already known as a manipulative figure. He lived off government benefits, had 17 children from different relationships, and was in an open marriage that only he seemed to benefit from. He had even appeared on TV before, bragging about his lifestyle. When one of his mistresses finally left him and took her children with her, Philpott became enraged. He came up with a twisted plan. He would set fire to his own house, heroically rescue his kids, and then frame his ex for the crime, hoping it would lead to her losing custody of the children. But the fire spread far faster than he expected. Instead of a dramatic rescue, he ended up killing his own children. He stood at that press conference sobbing and pleading for answers. Fully aware that he was the one responsible, Philpott was later convicted and is now serving a life sentence in prison. Story 7. In the documentary Paris is Burning, there's a moment where drag queen Dorian Corey is getting ready and reflects on life. "I always had hopes of being a big star, but as you get older, you aim a little lower. Everybody wants to make an impression, some mark upon the world. Then you think, you've made a mark on the world if you just get through it and a few people remember your name. Then you've left a mark. You don't have to bend the whole world. I think it's better to just enjoy it. Pay your dues and just enjoy it. If you shoot an arrow and it goes real high, hooray for you." She delivers it with a deep world weariness, as if all the fight had gone out of her. After Dorian passed away in 1993, a shocking discovery was made in her apartment. A suitcase containing the decomposed body of a man who had been shot in the head. The body had been there for around 15 years. That means that during the filming of Paris is Burning, she had already been keeping the corpse hidden for years. Rewatching the film with that knowledge makes her words feel eerily different. Story 8. This was featured on an old episode of Oprah long before I was born, but it was later included in an anniversary box set. A mother had recorded a series of mom tutorials for her young daughter. At first it seemed like a sweet idea, videos teaching things like how to tie a ponytail or alter a prom dress. But the real reason behind them was heartbreaking. She had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and wasn't expected to live past her daughter's 3rd birthday. Her daughter later shared that she watched the videos throughout her entire childhood and still plays them whenever she feels like she needs her mom around. What made it so haunting was how, beyond the basic tutorials, the videos were essentially a prolonged goodbye letter. In them, the mother speculated about what her daughter might look like as an adult, what kind of guy she might date, and the fun memories she and her dad would share. It's terrifying to think about how she had to film all of these in such a short time, knowing she wouldn't be there for her daughter's future. But at the same time, it's incredibly moving that she left behind a way to always be there when her daughter needed her. Story 9. In 2004, a woman named Rachel O'Reilly was brutally murdered in her home just north of Dublin, Ireland. A few days later, while police were still investigating, Rachel's husband and her grieving parents appeared on the Late Late Show, Ireland's most watched Friday night talk show, to discuss the tragedy. Her father was visibly shattered, barely able to speak, completely crushed by grief. But what no one knew at the time was that the husband was the killer. He had meticulously planned Rachel's murder so he could be with another woman he was having an affair with. Sitting beside the devastated parents of the woman he had viciously bludgeoned to death, he kept a straight face, playing the role of a grieving widower. He lied to them, to the host, and to the million people watching that night, all without a flicker of guilt. Looking back, knowing the truth, the footage is chilling. Story 10. This isn't terrifying, but it definitely fits into the category of dark behind-the-scenes stories. In Back to the Future, there's a moment right after the famous "I am Darth Vader" scene where you can clearly see that Marty's dad, George McFly, had been crying. He also has an odd, shaved-on-the-sides haircut that looks a bit out of place. The reason? Crispin Glover, who was only about 20 years old at the time, had a major disagreement with the producers over how his character's hair should look after the scene. The dispute ended with them forcing a haircut on him. It's unclear whether they physically made him sit in the chair or simply pressured and yelled at him until he complied, but either way, it left him in tears. Glover later claimed that producers openly mistreated him in front of extras, which is backed up by the fact that these same producers had a reputation for being difficult. They also notoriously mistreated the actor who replaced Glover in the second Back to the Future movie. Glover was reportedly so nervous on set that he had to redub some of his lines because he could barely speak during filming. While some say this was just inexperience, it doesn't really add up. He had already played a main role in Friday the 13th Part 4 and other films without any issues. His troubled relationship with the Back to the Future team continued for years. The producers even went so far as to use prosthetics and old footage to make it look like he appeared in the sequel without his permission. This led to a lawsuit, which Glover won, setting a precedent in Hollywood regarding actors' likeness rights. People often dismiss Glover as being weird or difficult, citing his bizarre David Letterman interview, but that was actually a performance. He was in character from a film he was promoting at the time, Ruben and Ed. Even the film's director confirmed that Glover had called him before the interview to discuss playing the character on the show. Despite everything, Robert Zemeckis still worked with Glover years later on Beowulf, which raises the question, if he was truly that difficult, why would the director intentionally collaborate with him again? No matter how odd people think he is, Glover was clearly screwed over by Hollywood. It's unsettling how easily the industry can manipulate narratives, especially when it comes to someone challenging powerful producers. Story 11. One of the most disturbing cases of the 1990s was Susan Smith's desperate public pleas for the safe return of her two children, when in reality, she had drowned them herself. In 1994, Smith captured the nation's attention when she claimed that a black man had hijacked her car with her two young sons inside. For days, she sobbed on national television, begging for their return. The story became an international sensation, even reaching people in Venezuela, where I lived at the time. But as investigators dug deeper, something felt off. One detective in particular simply didn't buy her story, even though most of the public had believed her. Days later, the truth came out. There had never been a carjacker. Smith had driven her own car into a lake with her two children still strapped inside, leaving them to drown. Some reports claim she even stood at the shore, watching as the car slowly sank beneath the water. Her motive: a man she had been romantically involved with had ended their relationship, writing in a letter that he didn't want children. Instead of accepting that, she murdered her sons. To this day, what's most chilling is how convincing she was when speaking to the media. Her raw emotions seemed so real that millions of people believed her. It's terrifying to think how easily some people can lie, even about something so horrific. Story 12. During the filming of Life of Pi, the Bengal tiger named King, who played the role of Richard Parker, nearly drowned on set. An official from the American Humane Association, AHA, Gina Johnson, was supposed to oversee the safety of the animals used in production. However, a leaked email from her revealed the terrifying reality of what happened. Last week, we almost killed King in the water tank. This one take with him went really bad and he got lost trying to swim to the side. Damn near drowned. I think this goes without saying, but don't mention it to anyone, especially the office. I have downplayed the F out of it. What makes this truly disturbing is that the very organization meant to protect animals on set was actively covering up the incident. And Life of Pi wasn't the only case of alleged negligence. AHA was also accused of allowing the deaths of 27 animals, including horses, goats, chickens, and sheep, during the filming of the Hobbit trilogy. The animals were reportedly kept on a farm with dangerous bluffs and sinkholes, leading to multiple deaths between takes. There have been numerous accusations against the AOHA over the years regarding their oversight of animal safety on film sets. Each time they either downplay, deny, or cover up the claims. It's chilling to think that the "No Animals Were Harmed" label, often seen in movie credits, might not always be telling the full truth. Story 13. I spent more time than I'd like to admit watching the Star Wars kid videos. The original clip was completely innocent, just a kid pretending to be a Jedi wielding a two-handed lightsaber. It was goofy, sure, but who didn't do silly things like that as a kid? But the backstory is far darker. The boy, Ghislain Raza, had recorded himself on a school video camera. Some classmates found the tape, decided to humiliate him, and shared it around the school before uploading it to P2P file sharing sites. It eventually went viral, one of the earliest internet memes. According to Wikipedia, Raza was subjected to relentless cyberbullying. He later recalled in a 2013 interview, "What I saw was mean. It was violent. People were telling me to commit suicide." He was called a pox on humanity, bullied at school, and forced to leave to pursue private tutoring. He lost friends and his life was completely derailed. The story has something of a hopeful ending. Years later, Raza returned to high school, completed his education, and became a law graduate. He went on to become the president of the Patrimoine Trois-Rivières Heritage Society. Eventually, he came forward to publicly reclaim his identity as the Star Wars Kid, using his experience to shed light on cyberbullying and the long-term harm that internet humiliation can cause, especially for children. It's a reminder that behind every viral meme, there's a real person who has to live with the consequences. Story 14. I'm actually writing a book on this exact experience. Even now, thinking about it gives me chills. Back in 2005 to 2006, I was living with my girlfriend, who always wanted to record our bedroom activities. This was before smartphones, so we used a camcorder. By the time we broke up, I had accumulated about a dozen tapes. I wasn't supposed to keep them, but I did. Years later, I received a subpoena from an attorney handling a lawsuit against the company my ex worked for. Out of those dozens of 90-minute tapes, there were about 5 minutes of footage that I needed to find, cut out, and submit as evidence. While reviewing the footage, I noticed something strange during one of our recorded encounters. At one point, while I was adjusting the camera, my then-girlfriend held up her right hand in a clenched fist. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring down the hallway toward our bedroom door. At first, I thought maybe she was making a weird gesture for the camera, but then I realized she was signaling to someone. Someone was there. It turns out she wasn't secretly involved with the Black Panthers or anything like that. She was telling someone at the end of the hall to hold their position. Over a 10-month period, I discovered 9 instances, spread across 9 different months, where she had secretly brought people into our home to watch while we had S. I was 42 at the time. She was 27. It completely shattered my life. At the time, nothing good came from it. The situation eventually escalated, involving the police, the Texas Rangers, and even the FBI. I've since completed the first draft of my book about the experience, and am about 3/4 of the way through the first edit. Writing it has been a way to process everything, but even now, it's hard to believe it actually happened. Story 15. WWF's Over the Edge pay-per-view event in May 1999 will forever be remembered for one of the most tragic incidents in professional wrestling history. Midway through the show, Owen Hart, performing as his comedic Blue Blazer character, was set to face the Godfather. To fit the superhero-like gimmick, the plan was for Hart to make a dramatic entrance by descending from the rafters into the ring using a harness system. However, due to poor planning and low-quality equipment, the harness malfunctioned. Hart fell 78 feet, 24 meters, crashing into the ring. He died instantly. The footage of his fall was never broadcast and has since been destroyed, but in a chilling moment, the WWF chose to continue the show despite the tragedy. Ringside announcer Jim Ross had to inform the live audience at home that Owen Hart, a man beloved by fans and wrestlers alike, had just died in the ring. Years later, Dark Side of the Ring, a documentary series by Vice, examined the tragedy, revealing the poorly executed stunt that led to Hart's death. Many still debate whether the event's name, Over the Edge, was just a coincidence or something far more unsettling. Story 16. This might get buried, and it's mostly personal to me, but I felt like sharing it anyway. A few months ago, my mother was featured on the local news in a heartwarming segment about teenagers volunteering to help senior citizens with yard work and home repairs during the scorching summer. She appeared as sweet as could be, smiling for the camera while the kids talked about how happy they were to help. It was a simple, feel-good piece, something wholesome and inspiring. But the truth is, she is a monster. She's as narcissistic as they come, psychologically abusive, manipulative, and toxic. None of her children speak to her anymore, and I've spent months in therapy trying to heal from everything she did and continues to try to do to me. The cruel irony of that news segment: one of her favorite punishments for me as a child was locking me out of the house to do yard work. She would do it in the middle of summer, with no access to food, water, or even a bathroom. It didn't matter if I was sick or exhausted. If she felt I deserved punishment for something as small as getting a B in school or having a messy room, out I went. One time there were severe thunderstorms and tornado warnings. I had no choice but to hide in the shed, terrified. She never came looking for me. Hours later, when I finally snuck back inside, soaked and shaking, she didn't say a word, just acted as if nothing had happened. Eventually, I ran away. I haven't seen her in 17 years and haven't spoken to her in 10. But no one watching that feel-good news segment would know any of that. It makes me wonder about all the other random people we see in these kinds of uplifting stories. How many of them are hiding dark secrets behind their picture-perfect smiles? Story 17. I never thought I'd have something to contribute to this, but after reading a few stories, I realized I do. It's not exactly innocent without context, but it becomes so much more haunting when you know the full story. Avenged Sevenfold's song Fiction from their album Nightmare was originally titled Death and was handed in by their drummer, James the Rev Sullivan, just days before he died of an accidental overdose. The eerie part? The song features piano and vocals that the Rev recorded himself before his passing. After his death, the band changed the title to Fiction, which was one of the Rev's nicknames, and decided to keep his recorded piano and vocals in the final version as a tribute. What makes it so chilling is the lyrics. Some were added later, but the Rev had already written and recorded parts that feel hauntingly prophetic. His voice can be heard singing lines like, "Now I think I understand how this world can overcome a man. I hope it's worth it here on the highway. Yeah, I know you'll find your own way when I'm not with you." Hearing their lead singer, M. Shadows, duet with his late best friend, especially given the song's message, is one of the most beautiful yet devastating things I've ever listened to. It's like a farewell letter he didn't even realize he was writing. Story 18. This story is one of the most disturbing things I've ever heard. A young woman was kidnapped in Alaska, and a few days later, her family received a horrifying photo. She was holding that day's newspaper with a note demanding ransom. The image became a symbol of hope for her loved ones, proof that she was still alive. Desperate to save her, the family paid the ransom, clinging to the belief that she would be returned safely. But the truth was so much worse. She had been murdered the very same day she was kidnapped. Her killer, Israel Keys, had left her body in his shed, where the freezing Alaskan temperatures preserved it. Days later, when he decided to try and extort money from her family, he retrieved her corpse, sewed her eyelids open, and posed her with the newspaper to make it look like she was still alive. The picture was convincing. Even her own family had no idea they were looking at a staged image of their dead daughter. Israel Keys turned out to be a prolific serial killer, responsible for multiple murders across the U.S. in the 90s and early 2000s. The sheer level of depravity and cruelty in this particular case is beyond comprehension. It's horrifying to think about how many other victims he may have had, many of whom may never be identified. Story 19. Grainy surveillance footage shows a woman walking into a convenience store, speaking briefly with the clerk, and then leaving. That woman was Diane Schuler. Shortly after, she drove her minivan up the exit ramp of the Taconic State Parkway, going the wrong way for 2 miles at approximately 85 miles per hour. She crashed head-on into another vehicle, killing herself, her daughter, all 3 of her nieces, and the 3 men in the other car. The only survivor was her 5-year-old son. The case became the focus of the HBO documentary, There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane, named after the final words one of her nieces spoke to her father over the phone before the crash. Toxicology reports confirm that Schuler was both drunk and high at the time of the accident. Despite this, her husband refused to accept the results, insisting that a medical issue caused her erratic behavior. He spent years trying to prove she had suffered a sudden medical emergency. If that wasn't bad enough, he later sued his own brother-in-law, the grieving father who lost all 3 of his daughters in the crash, because he owned the minivan Diane had been driving. It remains one of the most haunting and controversial tragedies in recent memory. Story 20. I'm from Wisconsin, and my mother's friend has pictures of her father. Photos she spent years destroying. He had disappeared when she and her siblings were young, and they grew up believing he had abandoned them. Feeling hurt and betrayed, she crossed out his face in family pictures, scratching him out of their memories. Years later, the news broke about Jeffrey Dahmer's murders. When the details of his victims and the gruesome remains found in his home were released, her family learned the truth. Her father hadn't run away. He hadn't abandoned them. He had been murdered by Jeffrey Dahmer. She spent years resenting him, believing he was a deadbeat dad who chose to walk away. In reality, he had been a victim, taken from them in the most horrific way possible. Now, those damaged photos, once scratched out in anger, are some of the only memories she has left of him. Story 21. Not exactly innocent, but here it goes. When I was young, I read Frida Kahlo's biography and fell in love with her story. So when Frida, starring Salma Hayek, came out, I was excited to see my favorite artist brought to life. I expected the film to touch on her time in France, including her well-documented relationships with women. What I wasn't expecting was that scene, an almost pornographic moment between Salma Hayek and Ashley Judd. It didn't feel right. It wasn't Salma's or Ashley's typical work, and it certainly didn't seem necessary for a film about Frida Kahlo's life, especially one likely to be shown in high schools. Years later, it all made sense. Harvey Weinstein, the notorious predator, had his hands all over the project. He wanted Salma, and when she refused his advances, he retaliated. He forced her and Ashley into filming that scene just so he could watch. Salma later revealed that he even had a special cut of the film made just for himself. It makes me sick to think about what else he did to other women behind closed doors. I truly believe that Salma was lucky. Edward Norton was working on the same project, and that likely prevented her from ever being completely alone with Weinstein. But it's terrifying to think about the countless others who weren't as lucky. Story 22, Peanut Butter Jelly Time. Not the song itself, but the story behind the man who sang it. The lead singer of the Buckwheat Boys, Jermaine Fuller, died in a tragic police standoff in 2002. In a bizarre twist, his brother-in-law, of all people, was Snoop Dogg, who personally tried to convince him to surrender. On August 12, 2002 in Las Vegas, Nevada, a concerned citizen reported that a man was firing a gun in the city. When police investigated, they found a man matching the description. As they attempted to question him, he suddenly pulled out a gun and started shooting. A shootout erupted, forcing the man to flee into an apartment building where he took 2 tenants hostage. The situation turned into an intense 11-hour standoff. Police spoke to the suspect over the phone, and he revealed his identity, Jermaine Fuller. Once law enforcement realized he was related to Snoop Dogg, they reached out to the rapper, who recorded a message pleading with Fuller to surrender. Despite Snoop Dogg's efforts and continued negotiations, Fuller refused to give up. Hours passed, and eventually the hostages were able to leave the apartment. A SWAT team moved in and found Fuller barricaded in the bathroom, dead. The exact cause of his death remains uncertain. Some believe he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, while others think he succumbed to injuries sustained during the earlier shootout. Hostages had reported seeing him bleeding from his arm when he first entered the apartment, but there was never any official confirmation. To this day, no one knows why Fuller was firing his gun that day. There were no reports of a robbery, assault, or any known conflicts involving him before police arrived. His death marked the end of the Buckwheat Boys, leaving Peanut Butter Jelly Time as an eerie reminder of his short-lived fame. I first learned about this story from a video by Wavy Web Surf. If you're interested, I highly recommend checking out his content. Story 23. This never made the news, but it's a story I'll never forget. I work at an apartment complex, and one of our residents, a really kind woman, had paid 3 months of rent, utilities, and everything else in advance. That wasn't necessarily unusual, but after a couple of weeks, she stopped responding to calls, which was strange. Her family became concerned and contacted us, asking for a welfare check. Legally, we weren't allowed to do that ourselves, so we called the police instead. My assistant manager escorted the officer to her apartment. When they went inside, nothing seemed out of place. Lights were still on, the bed was neatly made, and there were no signs of distress. Her car was parked outside in front of her building, untouched. As my assistant manager walked past the vehicle, she felt an inexplicable sense of dread. Something just felt wrong. The cop checked the car, but the windows were tinted and the doors were locked, so they left without finding anything. It wasn't until the next morning that the woman's sister, desperate for answers, came to check the car herself. What she found was devastating. Inside, the woman had taken 2 cooking pots, filled them with charcoal, and lit them on fire before lying down in the back seat. The carbon monoxide from the burning charcoal slowly filled the car, killing her in her sleep. Her sister was the one who found her. She had been inside the car the entire time, just a few feet away from where the police and my assistant manager had stood the day before. The realization that she was right there and that no one had known still haunts me. Story 24. During September 11th, one of the many heartbreaking emergency calls came from Kevin Cosgrove, a man trapped in the South Tower of the World Trade Center. His call, which lasts about 5 minutes, starts with him and 2 other men stuck on one of the higher floors. Thick smoke and fire had cut off any escape route. What makes the recording eerie is how, at first, he sounds more annoyed than fearful, completely unaware of the true danger he's in. He tells the 911 operator something like, "Look, just get up here." I called my wife and told her I was fine and leaving the building, and then we got trapped. FDNY reassures him that they're on their way. But as time passes, he begins to panic, realizing the smoke is getting worse and help isn't arriving fast enough. His breathing grows heavier, and then, just as the situation reaches its peak, his final words are heard, an agonized, "Oh God!" before the call abruptly cuts out. That was the exact moment the South Tower collapsed. Kevin Cosgrove's call remains one of the most chilling and tragic recordings from that day. A haunting reminder of how quickly everything changed for those trapped inside. Story 25. The Hart family's YouTube channel appeared to be wholesome on the surface. A white couple had adopted 6 black children and posted videos documenting their lives together. But behind the curated image of a happy family, something much darker was happening. Jennifer and Sarah Hart were not loving parents. They were abusers. Their YouTube videos, once seen as heartwarming, now feel deeply unsettling. There are moments where they deliberately make their kids uncomfortable, and it's clear in hindsight that the children were being exploited. The abuse went unnoticed for years, but eventually the horrifying truth came out. Jennifer and Sarah Hart killed themselves and all 6 of their children by driving their SUV off a cliff. Perhaps the most disturbing part of their story is a widely shared photo of one of their sons, Devonte Hart. In the viral image, Devonte is seen outside holding a free hug sign as a white police officer embraces him. The picture was celebrated at the time as a symbol of unity, love, and racial harmony. But knowing what we know now, the image takes on a horrifying new meaning. After the abuse was exposed, many people speculated that Devonte wasn't crying from happiness, but from desperation. It's likely that in that moment, he wasn't moved by the kindness of a police officer. He was silently begging for someone to save him. Story 26. At first glance, this picture of Brazilian Formula One driver Ayrton Senna looks like just another pre-race shot from the 1990s. But this wasn't just any race. This was the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix at Imola, the last race Senna would ever drive. What happened next became one of the darkest moments in motorsport history. On lap 7, as Senna entered the high-speed Tamburello corner at over 300 kilometers per hour, something went wrong. A combination of suspension and steering rod failure caused his car to veer off track and slam into the concrete wall. The impact was devastating. His car shattered and debris flew everywhere. Senna was motionless. The most chilling part? Footage from the crash shows Senna's head moving slightly after impact. But doctors later confirmed that he was already dead. A trackside marshal described it as the moment his soul left his body. Then something unexpected happened. As other drivers passed the wreckage, one car came to a sudden stop. A driver jumped out and tried to run towards Senna. That driver was Eric Comas. Years earlier, Senna had saved Comas' life. During a qualifying session in Belgium, Comas had crashed and was knocked unconscious inside his car. Senna, without hesitation, stopped his own car, ran across the track, and pulled Comas out, preventing an explosion. Now Comas was desperate to return the favor, but this time, it was too late. Somehow the story gets even sadder. When investigators examined Senna's wrecked car, they found something unexpected, a folded Austrian flag. The day before Senna's crash, Austrian driver Roland Ratzenberger had died in a horrifying accident during qualifying. Ratzenberger was a close friend of Senna, and Senna had planned to honor him by waving the flag after winning the race. He never got the chance. The 1994 San Marino Grand Prix remains one of the darkest weekends in racing history, claiming the lives of 2 drivers in just 48 hours. Senna's death changed Formula One forever, leading to major safety reforms. But to this day, fans and drivers still mourn the legend lost that day. Story 27. The Pennhurst Asylum found footage is one of the creepiest internet mysteries I've ever come across. A man and a woman, both seemingly in their early 20s, entered the abandoned Pennhurst State School and Hospital with a camera. They uploaded the footage in 2 parts. Part 1 shows them exploring, joking around, and filming the decaying hallways. The timestamp at the bottom reads May 4th, 2008. There's nothing too unusual, just your typical urban exploration. Part 2 picks up exactly where Part 1 ended. They continue exploring, laughing, and making comments about the eerie atmosphere. Eventually, they climb a flight of stairs. Then, everything cuts to black. When the video resumes, the shot is suddenly outside, in the surrounding woods. But something is wrong. According to the timestamp, less than a minute had passed since they were on the stairwell. How did they get outside so quickly? The camera then cuts to complete darkness. When the timestamp reappears, it now reads May 5th, 2008, 8 p.m., almost 24 hours later. No explanation, no more footage, Just a missing day. To this day, no one knows if the video was a hoax or if something truly paranormal happened inside that asylum. Some believe it was an elaborate internet mystery, while others think the two experienced a time slip, or worse. If you're curious, Scare Theater did a deep dive analysis on Pennhurst in this footage. I highly recommend checking it out. And with that, I think I need to stop looking at this thread. It's almost 2 a.m., and I'm starting to get chills just thinking about it. Story 28. I don't want to go looking for them, but there are a lot of old clips of Etika, one of the most passionate and charismatic video game streamers, casually joking about what his funeral should be like. At the time, it was just humor, nothing serious. But looking back, those clips are hard to watch. Etika was known for his over-the-top excitement, his infectious energy, and his deep love for gaming. But beneath that, he struggled. Over the course of a year, he experienced multiple mental breakdowns, was hospitalized several times in a psychiatric ward, and exhibited increasingly erratic behavior. Still, many of his fans and followers assumed it was just part of his online persona. Some even believed it was an elaborate ARG alternate reality game, some kind of cryptic internet puzzle. Then in June 2019, he posted a final video titled, "I'm Sorry." In it, he reflected on his life, expressing regret for the things he would never get to experience, while still talking about his favorite things with that same enthusiasm. He sounded eerily at peace. Shortly after posting the video, he jumped off the Manhattan Bridge. For days, the internet speculated, hoping it was all just another stunt. But then, the NYPD pulled a body from the river, wearing the same clothes Etika had on in his final video. In the aftermath, an enormous community memorial was set up near the bridge, marking the spot where his belongings had been found. The outpouring of love and grief was overwhelming. Even though most of us never knew him personally, his energy made us feel like we did. Sometimes I go back and watch his old streams because I miss the excitement he always brought. But it's hard. When he jokes about his own funeral, you realize how little we really knew about what was going on in his mind. It's heartbreaking. Even though I never met him, I still think about him. I wouldn't call it grief exactly, but it's something strange, something uncomfortable. It makes me want to hug my parents, check in on my friends, and remind the people I love that I care about them. Life is short and precious. Be kind to your loved ones. Story 29. 2 years ago, I got a voicemail on my brand new phone. And when I say brand new, I mean I had literally just bought it a few hours earlier. My last phone had fallen into a lake. So I was confused. No one knew my new number, but I played the message anyway. It was a man singing happy birthday to someone named Jen. He sounded older, maybe mid-30s, cheerful and warm. In the background, I could hear the faint wail of sirens and the sound of a car speeding by. I didn't know a Jen. I barely had any female friends. But the message was sweet, so I figured I'd do the decent thing. I sent a voice message back, letting him know he must have dialed the wrong number. No response. My message was never even read. I tried to brush it off, but something about it felt off. Then later that night, my phone rang. Same number. Finally, I thought, I'd get some answers. But when I picked up, it wasn't the man. It was a woman crying. Through her sobs, she told me that I was the last person he had contacted. He had planned to end his life that day, on his wife's birthday. She explained that he had schizophrenia, and that dying on her birthday wasn't an issue for him. But at the last moment, firefighters intervened and stopped him before he jumped off a building. She told me about her love for him, how she never wanted a divorce, how painful it was to watch him suffer. I had no idea what to say. I sat there, mostly silent, until I remembered a few Tumblr quotes about love and shared them with her. It wasn't much, but it seemed to help. When we hung up, I was in shock. My whole body felt cold. I had no idea why I had been the person he called. But here's the part that still gets me. Every year on July 17th, she calls me. The first year she sounded a little stronger. The next year, even more. Now when we talk, we laugh. She tells me about her life, her work, her plans. She got promoted, she bought a house, and most importantly, she's happy. Her husband was admitted for treatment the year after that call, and today she has 1-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. She named the girl after me, Lily and Lucas. I'm crying as I write this because I never expected any of this. I was just a stranger who answered the wrong call, but now somehow I feel like I've been part of her story, and I am so happy that she made it through. Story 30. There are old clips on YouTube from Oprah and Dr. Phil featuring a little blonde girl named Johnny Schofield, who was believed to have schizophrenia. In those interviews, she spoke about her imaginary friends and her case was widely publicized as a rare, severe childhood onset of the disorder. However, years later, a disturbing truth emerged. Last year, Yanni and her younger brother Bodhi were removed from their mother's care and placed into foster care. It turns out that neither of them may have ever had schizophrenia at all. Instead, their mother had been giving them high doses of old-school antipsychotics, drugs so powerful they may have caused permanent damage to their developing brains. She had been documenting their lives on YouTube, uploading videos that, at first glance, seemed normal. Christmas mornings, outings, daily routines. But in reality, they were anything but normal. The children were so heavily sedated that they were barely conscious. In several videos, they could hardly form words. Their apartment was filthy, and both the mother and stepfather appeared controlling and erratic. For those who had seen the bright, talkative young Johnny on Oprah, it was horrifying to witness what had become of her. Online communities had been following the family for years, suspecting abuse. But one of the most active users leaking information turned out to be Michael Schofield, Johnny's estranged father. Though he was vocal about his concerns, he wasn't exactly a great parent himself. He even admitted to shaking Johnny when she was a baby. The entire situation is a disturbing example of how parental manipulation can shape a child's entire life, and how something presented as a tragic medical case can sometimes be something far more sinister. Story 31. The Doctor Who serial Revenge of the Cybermen might seem like just another sci-fi adventure, but behind the scenes, it played out more like a horror movie. The story was filmed in Wookey Hole, a cave system in England with a long history of paranormal activity. Legends speak of witches, spirits, and strange occurrences deep within the caverns. The first eerie event happened before filming even started. Director Michael E. Bryan arrived for a location recce, a pre-filming visit to assess the area for shooting, and while walking through the caves, he saw what appeared to be the ghostly figure of a diver. The spirit was believed to be that of a man who had died in the caves years earlier. Then when production actually began, the crew decided to mock the cave's haunted reputation. There was a rock formation known as the Witch of Wookey Hole, and as a joke, the team dressed it in witch's clothing, taunting the legend of the witch's curse. That's when things started to go wrong. First, an electrician suddenly fell from a ladder, injuring himself. Then actress Elizabeth Sladen, who played Sarah Jane Smith, was nearly killed when the boat she was in went out of control and started spinning wildly. She would have drowned if not for stuntman Terry Walsh, who dove into the water and pulled her to safety. After these incidents, the crew became genuinely spooked. From that point forward, they chose to treat the witch's legend with respect. After that, the rest of the shoot went ahead smoothly, almost as if something had been appeased. Story 32. 2 videos, same guy. I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but the story goes something like this. He killed someone and disposed of the body in a dumpster, timing it perfectly so that by the time police arrived, the trash would have already been collected, leaving little to no evidence behind. Thinking he had executed the perfect crime, he even agreed to be interviewed on live television as someone who was close to the victim. He played the role of the concerned friend, acting completely innocent. But there was one thing he hadn't planned for. Police had locked down the entire area, stopping all activity, including garbage collection. That meant the dumpster hadn't been emptied, and when officers searched it, they found the body. The interview footage is chilling. As soon as the reporter mentions that a body has been discovered, his entire demeanor shifts. His face goes blank. He stammers, "Body?" as if he can't believe what he's hearing. Then he completely shuts down, tuning everything out and slowly sitting down on the curb, realizing he's caught. The second video is even more disturbing. It's his police interrogation footage, nearly 2 hours long. Throughout the entire session, he barely moves a muscle. The only time he moves is to slightly turn his head to look at the officers. It's creepy as hell to watch. You can almost see the moment when he realizes his perfect plan has completely fallen apart. Story 33. This might not be as shocking as some other stories, but if you were a WWE fan in 2007, you probably remember the Chris Benoit tragedy. I was watching Monday Night Raw live that night. The episode was originally supposed to be a 3-hour special, revealing the Who Killed Vince McMahon storyline, where his limo had exploded the week before. But instead of tuning in to see the next chapter of the scripted drama, we tuned in to hear the real-life news. Chris Benoit was dead. The entire show became a tribute to him. They played old clips, wrestlers shared heartfelt memories, and the tone was somber. But then as the episode aired, new information started coming out. First, it was reported that Benoit's wife and son were also found dead. Then as time passed, the rumors started shifting. There was something off about this. One of the most unsettling parts of the broadcast was William Regal's segment. He had been a close friend of Benoit and was clearly shaken, but something in his demeanor shifted as more details emerged. His tribute wasn't filled with the same glowing praise as the others. Instead, he spoke cautiously, saying that he wasn't there to talk about Benoit as a person, only as a professional wrestler. By the time the episode ended, it was becoming clear. This wasn't just a tragic accident. Benoit had murdered his wife and son before taking his own life. Watching that broadcast now, knowing what was happening in real time, makes it so much more chilling. You can see the exact moment people like Regal start to realize that something wasn't right. The next day, WWE erased Benoit from history, never mentioning him again. Story 34. There's a short clip from Saturday Night Live featuring Phil Hartman. It's from a skit where he's sitting at a table, and in the foreground, there's a woman with her back to the camera. Nothing seems unusual at first, just a typical comedy sketch, until you hear who that woman was. That was Phil Hartman's wife, Bryn Hartman. Bryn was a struggling actress, growing increasingly jealous of Phil's fame and success. She was resentful that her career never took off the way his did, and their marriage was deeply troubled. Despite this, Phil always tried to help her. He even pushed for her to get roles on SNL, but the producers weren't interested. They reportedly found her behavior on set erratic. She would try to draw attention to herself, constantly turning toward the camera, even in scenes where she wasn't supposed to be the focus. In this particular clip, if you look closely, you can see her earrings shaking back and forth. That wasn't because she was moving naturally. It was because she kept trying to turn toward the camera, desperate to be seen on television. The producers and director had to keep telling her to turn back around. Years later, in a fit of jealous rage, Bryn murdered Phil Hartman while he slept, then took her own life. Knowing what happened, that tiny detail in the SNL clip, the shaking earring, the subtle struggle for attention, becomes deeply unsettling. It was a glimpse into something much darker, playing out on national television before anyone realized what was coming. Story 35. In Chile, there was a beloved TV host named Felipe Camiraga. He was the kind of person everyone adored, always joking, always kind, and deeply committed to social causes. He had a rare charisma that made him one of the most cherished figures on Chilean television. In 2010, a photograph captured the moment he and his crew boarded a plane bound for Juan Fernandez, a remote island in the South Pacific. They were on a humanitarian mission to help rebuild the community after a devastating earthquake had hit the country just months earlier. Alongside him were another well-respected TV personality and a millionaire philanthropist leading the project. But they never made it. The plane crashed into the ocean that very day. The investigation later revealed that the Chilean Air Force had assigned them a faulty aircraft, one not fit for such a dangerous flight. Landing on Juan Fernandez was already a treacherous task due to the strong Pacific winds, requiring the best pilots and top-tier equipment. Instead, they were sent with neither. The entire crew perished. The country was left in shock. The TV station where Felipe worked never fully recovered from the loss, and while investigations were conducted and families were compensated, the damage was irreparable. To this day, the tragedy remains one of the most painful moments in Chilean media history. The photo of them boarding the plane, a moment full of purpose and hope, is now a haunting reminder of what could have been. Story 36. The final episode of What's My Line, featuring Dorothy Kilgallen, isn't just another vintage game show clip. It's the last public appearance of a journalist who many believe knew too much. Dorothy Kilgallen wasn't just a TV personality. She was a sharp, fearless, investigative journalist. She had already played a role in overturning a high-profile murder conviction by exposing judicial misconduct, and at the time of her death, she was deeply involved in investigating the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. She was reportedly preparing to publish groundbreaking findings that contradicted the official narrative. That final episode aired on November 7, 1965. She seemed normal, engaged, witty, and as perceptive as ever. But later that night, she was found dead. Her death certificate listed the cause as acute ethanol and barbiturate intoxication. Officially, it was ruled an accident, though many have speculated otherwise. Her husband claimed she had been in high spirits after the show, making suicide unlikely. But the most suspicious detail? The notes she had been compiling for her JFK investigation? Gone. Completely disappeared. To this day, theories persist. Some believe she was silenced before she could reveal what she knew. Others think it really was an accidental overdose. But watching that final episode, knowing what happened just hours later, makes it hard to ignore the unsettling possibility that she was a journalist who got too close to the truth. Story 37. Chelino Sanchez is considered one of the greatest regional Mexican singers of all time, often referred to as the King of the Corrido. His songs told stories of crime, drugs, and violence, subjects that often blurred the line between fiction and real-life danger. On May 16, 1992, Chelino performed what would become his final concert. The video footage from that night has since become infamous. At the very start of the performance, a waiter hands him a note from an unknown sender. He unfolds it, reads it, and his expression subtly changes. He no longer looks confident, his body stiffens, and his face darkens. According to legend, the note contained either a death threat or a warning, but despite this, Chelino continued the show, singing like nothing had happened. The next day, as he was traveling through the streets of Culiacan in a suburban truck, a group of men dressed as federal police intercepted the vehicle. They abducted him and hours later executed him. At around 6 a.m., his body was found abandoned on the side of a dirt road with 2 gunshot wounds to the back of his head. The reason for his murder remains a mystery. Some believe he had angered a powerful drug lord, possibly by sleeping with his wife. Others think he was targeted for singing narco corridos that hit a little too close to home. Whatever the reason, Chelino's assassination only cemented his legendary status, turning him into an icon of both Mexican music and the violent world it's so often depicted. Story 38. When I was in middle school, I was really into Christian music. There was one song I loved, but for the life of me, I can't remember its name. The music video was set in a third world country, showing a mission trip where a band played among local children. It was meant to be uplifting, full of joy and color, but there was one detail that haunts me to this day. One scene involved throwing powder bombs, like the ones used in color runs, before the kids joyfully ran into the ocean. It looked innocent enough, but in the behind-the-scenes video, they casually mentioned that one of the children drowned during the shoot, and then they just moved on as if it was nothing. I was only 13 at the time, so I didn't think to look into it further. But now, as an adult, I can't stop wondering about it. How was that just a side note? Did they continue filming after it happened? Did they ever acknowledge it properly? It's chilling to think about how easily something so tragic was brushed aside for the sake of a music video. Story 39. The last known footage of Elisa Lam is one of the most bizarre and unsettling videos ever released. Elisa was a Canadian student visiting California in 2013. She was staying at the infamous Cecil Hotel, a building notorious for suicides, murders, and even housing serial killers while they were still active. Elisa called her parents every day, but on the day she was supposed to check out, she never did. Concerned, her parents contacted the LAPD, prompting a full search of the hotel, including the roof, with police dogs. Nothing was found. A week later, with no leads, the LAPD released the now infamous elevator video. In the footage, Elisa enters the elevator and presses multiple buttons. She waits. Nothing happens. She peeks out, looking left and right, as if checking if someone is following her. Then she hides in the corner, standing eerily still. Her behavior grows increasingly erratic. She steps in and out of the elevator, gestures strangely, and appears to be talking to someone just outside the door. But there's no one there. For 2.5 minutes, the elevator does not close, as if malfunctioning. But the moment she steps away and leaves the frame, it suddenly starts working again. Soon after the footage was released, guests at the Cecil Hotel started complaining about low water pressure. Some even reported that the water had a blackish color and a foul taste. On February 19, 2013, maintenance workers investigated the hotel's 1,000-gallon rooftop water tanks. Inside one of them, they found Elisa's decomposing body. Her death remains shrouded in mystery. The official ruling was accidental drowning, attributed to her bipolar disorder. But there are huge unanswered questions. First, how did she even get to the roof? All doors and staircases leading there were locked and required security codes. If she had used the fire escape, it would have been nearly impossible for her not to be seen. Second, how did she get inside the tank? There were no fixed ladders leading to the opening, and the metal lids were heavy. Workers typically needed tools to remove them. Yet her body was found inside, and the lid was mysteriously closed. To this day, theories range from mental illness to foul play, and even supernatural forces. Some believe she was being followed in the elevator video. Others think she was hallucinating, leading to an accidental fall, but nothing fully explains the how. Elisa Lam's case remains one of the strangest and most disturbing mysteries of the modern era. Every time I watch that elevator footage, I can't shake the feeling that something deeply wrong happened to her that night. Story 40. The recording of Gimme Shelter for the Rolling Stones' 1969 album, Let It Bleed, is one of rock history's most iconic moments. But behind the scenes, it carries a tragic story. It was a late-night, drug-fueled session when the band suddenly felt inspired to record the track. They needed a powerful backing vocal, so they called in Merry Clayton, a talented session singer, insisting that she come immediately to the studio. Despite her husband's hesitation, she was in her third trimester of pregnancy, Clayton agreed. She arrived at the studio in her pajamas, barely awake. Then she delivered one of the most chilling vocal performances in rock history. During the latter choruses, her voice cracks with raw intensity, belting out, "Rape! Murder! It's just a shot away." The moment was so powerful that Mick Jagger can be heard shouting, "Woo!" in response. She nailed the take and went home exhausted. Hours later, tragedy struck. Merry Clayton suffered a miscarriage. Doctors believe the sudden surge of adrenaline and the physical strain of going from deep sleep to full-force singing may have contributed to the loss of her baby. Decades later, Gimme Shelter remains one of the greatest rock songs ever recorded. But for Merry Clayton, it was a song that came at an unimaginable cost.